Welcome to Britain at War. In July 1940, Berlin stood wrapped in banners, flags, and the echoing sound of military marches, as if the entire city had become a monument to victory. The Crawl Opera House, once a place of culture and music, had now transformed into the ceremonial throne room of a rising empire. Adolf Hitler entered the hall with the calm confidence of a man who believed destiny was in his hands. His generals stood behind him like sculpted symbols of glory, their uniforms gleaming under the warm yellow lights, the medals over their chests shining like polished mirrors of conquest. France had fallen just weeks before, collapsing with shocking speed that sent tremors through every capital in Europe. Poland lay crushed. Denmark and Norway had surrendered. Belgium and the Netherlands had been overwhelmed. Hitler now stood as master of the European continent. Millions across the world listened as he began to speak, his voice carefully measured and serious. He did not boast or rage. He spoke softly, almost thoughtfully. He offered what he called peace. He said there was no need for further destruction. He told Britain that Germany did not seek the fall of the British Empire. He claimed he respected their history, their achievements, their pride. But in that moment, the most important thing was not what Hitler said aloud, but the power and dominance behind his words. It was a peace offer made by a conqueror, not by a friend. A peace that came from the top of a mountain of defeat. Meanwhile, in London, the atmosphere was entirely different. Heavy, tense, and uncertain. The British Isles stood alone now. France, once the great shield of Western Europe, had collapsed and signed armistice. The British Expeditionary Force had barely escaped from Dunkirk, leaving behind tanks, guns, ammunition, supplies, almost everything except the will to fight. The mood in government meetings was grim. Many believed negotiation was the only rational path. They argued that Britain was isolated, unable to match Germany's power. But standing among them was Winston Churchill, who had just become Prime Minister months earlier. He was not a perfect man, loud, blunt, stubborn, but he possessed something no statistic could measure, an unbreakable refusal to surrender. Churchill spoke not only with political reasoning, but with spirit. He said that if Britain accepted Hitler's peace now, it would be accepting slavery disguised as safety. He said that nations did not die all at once, they died the moment they surrendered their courage. And he believed, with every fibre of his being, that Britain must not take that step. So when Hitler's speech was broadcast, Churchill listened quietly, without change of expression, without fear, without hesitation. And when it ended, he simply said, "We shall not speak to him." Hitler could not understand this reaction. From his perspective, Britain's situation was hopeless. Germany's armies had proven unstoppable on land. The Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, was large, experienced, confident. The German Navy, though smaller than Britain's, was growing rapidly. Every political calculation suggested Britain should choose survival over pride. But Hitler did not understand that for Churchill, this was not a war for land or empire, it was a war for identity. Churchill believed that surrendering would erase everything Britain stood for, its heritage of freedom, its traditions, its belief in justice, its role in history. Churchill believed that nations are not defined by the battles they win, but by the battles they refuse to avoid. And so, when Hitler expected negotiation, Britain instead closed the door entirely. Foreign Secretary Lord Halifax delivered the official British response: Britain would continue the war. The speech was brief, clear, and final. Hitler had extended the offer of peace. Britain had answered with war. Hitler's pride was wounded. He had expected to dictate terms, to reshape Europe without further resistance. He had believed that Britain, shocked by France's collapse, would step aside. Instead, Britain stood defiant. Now Hitler faced a challenge he had hoped to avoid, a two-front war. His long-term dream had always been to invade the Soviet Union and conquer the vast lands of the East. But he could not begin that campaign while Britain remained a threat. And so the plan to invade Great Britain, Operation Sea Lion, was activated. The plan required the Luftwaffe to destroy the Royal Air Force, clearing the skies for German ships and landing forces. Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, boasted that victory would take 2 weeks. German bombers and fighters began gathering along airfields across France. The invasion seemed inevitable. But wars are not decided by numbers alone. Wars are decided by the strength of those who refuse to be broken. The Battle of Britain began in the summer of 1940. The skies became the battleground. Young British pilots, many barely 19 years old, rose in Spitfires and Hurricanes to defend their homeland. The Luftwaffe attacked in waves, bombers escorted by swarms of fighters. Airfields burned. Runways were cratered. Planes exploded in mid-air, leaving only trails of black smoke marking the sky. Pilots died in seconds, often before they even saw the enemy that struck them. But the RAF fought on. The pressure was unbearable. Ground crews worked day and night to repair damaged aircraft, pushing themselves to exhaustion. Churchill visited a fighter command center where radar screens tracked the incoming enemy. As he watched the small lights representing British fighters fighting against overwhelming numbers, tears filled his eyes. Later, he would say, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." Göring believed fear would eventually break the British spirit. So the Luftwaffe changed strategy. Instead of attacking military targets, they would attack cities. The Blitz began. London burned. Coventry burned. Liverpool, Birmingham, and many others faced night after night of bombing. Families slept in underground tunnels as the streets above turned into firestorms. Children carried gas masks to school. Buildings collapsed into mountains of stone and ash. Yet Britain did not break. The destruction did not weaken resolve. It strengthened it. People sang in shelters. They shared bread, blankets, and hope. And Churchill walked among them, never protected, never distant, showing the people that their leader suffered with them. By October, the Luftwaffe had taken heavy losses. The RAF still stood. German invasion barges sat unused along the French coast. Operation Sea Lion was postponed, then quietly cancelled. Britain had survived the attempt to crush it. And because Britain survived, the war changed. The United States watched from across the Atlantic. Many Americans believed the war was lost. But now they saw something different. Britain was still fighting. President Roosevelt believed that helping Britain was not charity, but the defense of global freedom. He began sending weapons, ships, supplies, and fuel. The partnership that would later save the world had begun. Meanwhile, Hitler turned his attention east and launched the invasion of the Soviet Union. The war expanded into one of the largest conflicts in history. Millions would die. Entire cities would be destroyed. Germany would eventually find itself stretched thin between two massive fronts. And as the years passed, the early confidence of 1940 began to crumble. The winter, the distance, the resistance, all slowly broke the German advance. And when the United States fully joined the war in 1941 after Pearl Harbor, the balance of power shifted completely. What had once seemed like unstoppable German dominance began to face the unstoppable combined strength of Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union. But all of this, the alliance, the global turning of the tide, the eventual downfall of Nazi Germany, traces back to one decision, one moment in history, one refusal. If Britain had accepted Hitler's peace offer in July 1940, the Soviet Union would have been attacked alone. There would have been no Western Front. There would have been no American intervention. There may have been no D-Day. Europe might have fallen entirely under Nazi control. The world would have become something unrecognizable, something dark and brutal. But that future was prevented because one nation, at the moment of greatest pressure, chose resistance instead of surrender. So the peace offer of 1940 was not simply a diplomatic moment, it was a crossroads of history. Hitler believed power shaped destiny. Churchill believed courage shaped destiny. Hitler believed intimidation could break nations. Churchill believed that some nations cannot be broken. And history remembered the side that endured. Britain's refusal was not easy, not safe, not guaranteed, but it was right. And because of that refusal, the world many of us know today, a world where freedom has meaning, was able to exist. Sometimes history is changed not by victory, but by refusal. Not by force, but by the willingness to stand when standing seems impossible. And in the summer of 1940, Britain stood. And the world is different because of it.